Caitlin Clark just called out the WNBA's broken system, and Candace Parker exposed the commissioner in a way no one saw coming. The Indiana Fever had just pulled off a huge win in the Commissioner's Cup, but instead of basking in the spotlight, Caitlin Clark turned her moment into a statement. When asked about the prize money, she didn't hold back. Clark pointed out that players make more from the mid-season cup than they do from winning the actual WNBA championship. Think about that for a second, the title every player dreams about. The crown of an entire season pays less than a one-off mid-season showcase. Her words cut straight to the heart of the league's biggest problem. The people running it seem more focused on flashy events than fixing the foundation. And fans were stunned that a rookie was the one brave enough to call it out. But that was only the beginning. Caitlin Clark's comments weren't just a one-off complaint, they cracked open a debate that has been simmering for years. The WNBA has always sold the dream of equality, but when you look at the numbers, it tells a different story. Rookie contracts hover in the low six figures, and for many players, endorsements often end up being worth more than their actual salary. And while Clark is already cashing in on major sponsorships, the veterans around her have spent years carrying the league on their backs without ever seeing compensation that reflects their impact. Take this for example. The prize money for winning the Commissioner's Cup sits at around $500,000 total, which gets divided among the team. Sounds good on paper, but the actual championship, the crown jewel of the entire season, pays significantly less. That means the pinnacle of success in women's basketball is financially devalued compared to a mid-season marketing event. It's like telling players, your ultimate dream matters less than a quick publicity stunt. This is why Clark's words hit so hard. Because she wasn't just talking about her own paycheck, she was exposing the fact that the league's priorities have been out of balance for years. And it wasn't just fans nodding along. Other players, past and present, immediately felt the sting of truth in what she said. For them, it wasn't just shocking, it was personal. And that's exactly where Candace Parker stepped in. As a two-time WNBA champion, an MVP, and one of the most respected voices in basketball, Parker didn't just stay quiet. She took the conversation Clark started and made it even bigger. When Candace Parker speaks, the basketball world listens. She's not just another veteran with opinions, she's a two-time champion, a league MVP, an Olympic gold medalist, and arguably one of the most respected figures to ever play the game. For nearly 2 decades, she's been the voice players lean on when the league refuses to hear them. And this time, she didn't hold back. Parker has been sounding the alarm for months, calling out how women's sports are treated not just by the league, but by the media that's supposed to cover them. She slammed networks for burying women's basketball while hyping men's games that drew smaller numbers. Her frustration was clear. How can the WNBA claim to be building momentum when it refuses to give its players the visibility they deserve? But her comments didn't stop with the media. When asked about the rise of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, Parker flipped the script. She said the constant Clark versus Reese narrative was lazy, a media creation meant to stir up clicks rather than elevate the league. Like, what are we doing? She asked. We've got an entire league full of talent, and the conversation always comes back to the same 2 players. In other words, Parker was exposing the same broken system Clark had just criticized, one where priorities are twisted, players are underpaid, and the spotlight is poorly managed. The timing couldn't have been sharper. Clark had fired the first shot, and now Parker, a legend of the game, was adding weight to the argument. Fans immediately connected the dots. If the rookie sensation and the veteran icon are both saying the league is mishandling its priorities, then maybe the problem isn't with the players at all, it's with the people at the top. And all eyes quickly turned toward one person, the commissioner. The WNBA's commissioner, Cathy Engelbert, has always tried to present herself as the steady hand guiding the league through growth. She's credited with expanding media deals, pushing sponsorships, and keeping the league afloat during difficult years. But when Caitlin Clark and Candace Parker both turned their attention toward the league's broken priorities, Engelbert found herself under fire in a way she hadn't before. Instead of ignoring the criticism, Engelbert responded, but her words only added fuel to the fire. She admitted that Clark had brought an unprecedented spotlight to the league, but she warned against leaning too heavily on a single player. In her view, no one athlete, no matter how great, could carry the entire WNBA. On paper, it sounded reasonable. In reality, it felt like a subtle attempt to downplay Clark's influence at the very moment she was fighting for fair treatment. Fans read between the lines. To many, Engelbert's statement sounded less like leadership and more like deflection. Here was a commissioner essentially saying, don't expect too much change, even if the biggest star in the league is demanding it. And for players who had spent years scraping by on minimal salaries, it felt like the same tired message. Sit tight, be patient, and trust the system that has never truly rewarded them. Parker's reaction only sharpened the divide. She reminded everyone that stars like Clark aren't just athletes, they're cultural forces capable of drawing millions of new fans into the game. To dismiss that power, Parker argued, was short-sighted at best and damaging at worst. The clash between Engelbert's cautious leadership and the players' demands for bold change created a storm that couldn't be ignored. And as the commissioner struggled to contain the narrative, the media made things even messier. While Clark and Parker were calling out the system, the media machine was busy running its own playbook. Instead of digging into the pay gap or questioning the league's priorities, headlines fixated on drama, specifically the so-called rivalry between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. Every game between Indiana and Chicago became hyped like a heavyweight title fight. Every foul magnified, every side-eye replayed endlessly on social feeds. The problem? That constant spotlight on Clark versus Reese turned into a smokescreen. It distracted fans from the larger conversation about why players were protesting, why they wore fair pay shirts before the All-Star game, and why veterans like Parker were sounding the alarm. Instead of being framed as a united front against a broken system, the narrative painted it as personal beef between two young stars. Candace Parker saw right through it. In interviews, she slammed the endless Clark-Reese storyline as manufactured drama, a media circus designed for clicks. Like, what are we doing? She said, exasperated. There are 12 teams in this league and dozens of players with incredible stories, but all anyone wants to talk about is one rivalry. Her point was simple. Focusing on two players might generate views, but it silences the broader voices demanding change. Clark herself seemed aware of the trap. Though she rarely fueled the media rivalry, her every move was spun into headlines whether she meant it or not. And the league quietly benefited from the buzz, cashing in on ticket sales and TV ratings while avoiding the harder questions about player treatment. But that strategy couldn't last forever. Because as the media milked the rivalry, players and fans alike began to connect the dots. Maybe the obsession with Clark and Reese wasn't just about hype, it was a way to bury the uncomfortable truth about the commissioner and the league's failures. And that realization led to an even bigger question: what happens when the players decide to push back harder, not just with words, but with action? By this point, it was clear. Caitlin Clark had sparked something much bigger than a post-game soundbite, and Candace Parker had amplified it with the credibility of a legend. Suddenly, fans, analysts, and even league insiders were asking the same question: what comes next? Rumors quickly spread that Clark's comments could play a huge role in shaping the next collective bargaining agreement. The current deal is set to expire soon, and whispers inside league circles suggest that players are already uniting behind the idea of demanding radical change. Not incremental steps, not empty promises, real reform. That means bigger championship bonuses, higher rookie contracts, and guarantees that players won't need overseas gigs in the offseason just to make ends meet. Some reports even claim that younger players are quietly looking to Clark as the face of this movement, while veterans are rallying behind Parker. If true, that creates a rare moment of unity across generations, something the WNBA hasn't seen in years. And when rookies and legends start speaking the same language, it puts enormous pressure on the commissioner's office. But here's where things get even more intriguing. Behind the scenes, sponsors are said to be watching closely. Corporate partners love Clark's popularity, but they don't want to be associated with a league that looks like it undervalues its stars. If sponsors start echoing the players' demands, Engelbert's room to maneuver could shrink dramatically. Of course, not everyone believes change is guaranteed. Some insiders argue the league will drag its feet, hoping Clark's star power and Reese's headlines continue to distract fans from the real issues. Others think Engelbert might try to outlast the storm, banking on the players eventually cooling off. But as Parker bluntly put it, this isn't going away. And she's right, because the truth is, once the conversation shifts from individual rivalries to structural reform, the league has no easy escape. And with Clark's voice growing louder by the day, Engelbert may soon face a choice: adapt to a new era of accountability, or risk losing the trust of the very players who built the league's future. But even that looming decision wasn't the end of the story, because what came next left fans questioning the league's credibility entirely. The tension that had been building all season finally began to spill over in ways the league couldn't control. It wasn't just Caitlin Clark raising her voice anymore, and it wasn't just Candace Parker lending her veteran authority. Suddenly, players across the league were stepping forward, and the frustration that had been whispered in locker rooms for years was now out in the open for everyone to hear. The breaking point came when players arrived at the All-Star game wearing warm-up shirts with bold messages like fair pay and respect the game. The move was impossible to ignore. Cameras zoomed in, social media exploded, and the commissioner was forced to sit courtside watching her own showcase event turn into a protest. What should have been a celebration of women's basketball became a stage for resistance, and Clark's earlier words hung in the air like a warning. The players were done being silent. Fans rallied behind them. Hashtags calling for pay reform trended within hours, and the narrative shifted from being about rivalries and highlight reels to something much bigger: justice, fairness, and the future of the league itself. Suddenly, Engelbert's carefully crafted message of slow, steady growth looked out of touch. To many fans, it sounded like an excuse to protect the status quo, while players were demanding bold change. Candace Parker, never one to mince words, sharpened her criticism. She reminded the league that stars like Clark, Reese, Aja Wilson, and Breanna Stewart had pulled record-breaking audiences, drawing millions of viewers that rivaled men's sports broadcasts. If the fans are showing up and the ratings are proving it, why aren't the players being treated like it? Parker asked in a nationally televised interview. Her words hit like a hammer, and fans echoed them across every platform. For the first time in years, it felt like the players held the upper hand. They had the momentum, the public on their side, and the numbers to back them up. And if the commissioner thought this was just another PR headache, she was quickly learning otherwise. Because the whispers coming out of player circles suggested something bigger was coming, an organized stand that could force the league into reforms it could no longer dodge. And that left fans asking the biggest question yet: if this battle keeps escalating, how far are the players willing to go to make sure their voices are heard? Caitlin Clark's rise was supposed to be about highlight reels and game-winning shots, but it's become so much more. In just one season, she forced the league to confront problems it had been sweeping under the rug for decades. Candace Parker, with the weight of her legacy, doubled down and exposed the deeper cracks that too many tried to ignore. Together, their voices cut through the noise of media rivalries and shallow narratives, shining a light on the uncomfortable truth. The WNBA cannot keep thriving if it refuses to truly value its players. The commissioner now finds herself at a crossroads. On one side is the old model: slow growth, cautious promises, and a hope that the hype will carry the league forward without major reforms. On the other side is a player-driven movement demanding fair pay, respect, and accountability. The choice she makes could define not only her own legacy, but the entire future of women's basketball. And here's the twist: fans are no longer just spectators. Social media has given them a seat at the table, and their support or backlash carries real weight. Sponsors are watching, players are uniting, and the league is under a microscope like never before. What started as one rookie's bold comment and one legend's sharp critique has transformed into a battle over the soul of the sport. So the question now is simple: will the commissioner listen and act before it's too late? Or will this growing storm of players, fans, and legends push the league into a revolution it can no longer control? Because one thing is certain: Caitlin Clark has already changed the game, and there's no going back.